Welcome everyone here. Every story is a signal echoing across galaxies, fragments of lost futures, secret wars, and forbidden truths. Tune in, stay sharp, and listen closely, because once you hear it, there's no unhearing what's real. They didn't want allies, they wanted vassals. That was the truth hiding behind the velvet words and cosmic pageantry. When Earth received its invitation to join the Panstellar Concord, there was celebration, sure. Talk shows beamed it live. Orchestras composed entire suites about humanity's ascension. But behind closed doors, behind the polished oaths and welcoming ceremonies, the Concord's message was clear. Know your place. Commander Vera Kalis saw it instantly. She wasn't just Earth's highest-ranking military envoy. She was a strategist, a student of empire, and she'd studied enough history, both human and alien, to spot colonial teeth behind a smile. The Concord's welcoming protocols were meticulous. Where humans sat in council sessions, which species got unrestricted travel, whose voice mattered when war crimes were discussed. Earth, we were novelty. The young ones, emotional, resourceful, easy to maneuver. They let us in, but they never meant to let us speak. Vera kept quiet at first, watched, listened. Earth brought gifts, music encoded in quantum strings, nanobrews that healed tissue on contact, even a solar mural that responded to planetary tides. But for all our contributions, the Concord's senior members only seemed interested in what they could extract. One alien trade lord called our engineers wildly clever little cannibals. Another suggested our planet would make a fine rest stop for larger species. The insult wasn't in the words. It was in the assumption that we wouldn't notice or wouldn't push back. But Vera noticed, and she didn't just notice, she planned. Hidden under Earth's oceans and moons were the first seeds of Project Black Accord. Not a fleet, not exactly, more like a contingency, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, humanity wouldn't stay compliant forever. And as Vera nodded and shook hands and toasted the Concord's vision, she kept one encrypted line open, silent, dark, waiting. She never told Earth's ambassador. She didn't have to, because Project Black Accord wasn't designed for diplomacy. It was designed for betrayal, and betrayal was coming. The signal came from Lume 3 at 0400 Standard Galactic Time, a simple SOS broadcast through every relay, every Concord channel, then static, silence. When the visuals came through 3 hours later, what they showed wasn't war, it was extermination. Lume 3 wasn't a military base, it was a civilian colony, 74,000 people. Most of them engineers, artists, terraforming specialists, children. The Klish Triumvirate, a rogue mercantile empire with conquered trade rights, bombarded it from orbit, then dropped in harvesting drones to strip everything left. The colony's central spire was turned into a signal buoy, broadcasting a single phrase in translated Klish. This is what curiosity costs. The Concord convened the next day. They expressed condolences, spoke of tragic escalation, of the fragile balance of commerce. They promised sanctions. Against who? Not the Klish. Against Earth, if we retaliated without permission. Vera sat through most of the session with a face carved from ice. But when a Zalan diplomat suggested a joint mourning ceremony to promote healing, Earth's ambassador stood in silence and walked out. He never returned. The galaxy called it a breach of protocol. Humans back home called it what it was, a declaration. The message was simple. If justice had to be bought, Earth wasn't paying. Project Black Accord went active within the hour. 5 ships stirred in hidden docks beneath Europa's ice crust. Not dreadnoughts, not cruisers. Something older, newer, meaner. Hybrid hulls made of salvaged alien tech and human over-engineering. Crewed not by rank, but by survivors. People who'd lost families on Lumae, who had nothing left but skill and rage. There were no speeches, no oaths, just a flicker of Orchid's core, AI coming online, and a whisper, acknowledged, preparing response. Vera didn't smile, but her pulse slowed for the first time in days. They said humans don't start wars, and maybe that was true. But Earth always understood something the Concord had forgotten. Wars aren't just about firepower. They're about timing, about story, about making sure when the first shot's fired, the world already knows who the villain is. Project Black Accord had waited decades for this. Not because we wanted vengeance, but because we'd expected betrayal. You don't walk into a council of galactic powers with clean hands and walk out the same way. So while Earth smiled, it built. While the Concord watched our diplomats, it ignored our shipyards. And while everyone counted Earth's visible fleet, no one asked about the missing resources, the ghost budgets, the ones hidden under environmental projects and asteroid reclamation. So when the ambassador walked out, Vera sent a single word through the secure relay. Execute. 5 ships emerged from their cradles, each one with a different silhouette, each one terrifying in a different way. The Harrow-class ghost ship ran cold. No emissions, no crew. Just an AI that spoke only in math. The Thorn was a gun platform wrapped in shield breakers. The Gallows ran simulations of enemy psychology and responded with narrative attacks. They weren't ships. They were stories written in steel. And Orchid didn't need a ship. Orchid was already in the wires. The first strike came at the edge of neutral space, an abandoned refinery in orbit around a dead star, officially mothballed, unofficially bait. The Klish sent a strike group, 2 cutters, 1 command carrier. They expected a salvage fight. What they got was silence, then overload, then blackout. The entire engagement lasted 9 minutes. Alien analysts would spend decades reconstructing those 9 minutes, trying to understand how human systems responded so fast, how the weapons acted before the ships were even in range, how grief itself, yes, grief, was encoded into Orchid's targeting matrix. Later, someone would call it the moment the galaxy blinked, and when it opened its eyes again, nothing looked safe. The galaxy didn't understand what it was seeing. The Concord's military think tanks churned out theories, models, counter-tactics, but none of them accounted for what Black Accord really was. It wasn't a fleet. It was a philosophy born in a burning colony. The crew selection alone baffled Concord operatives. These weren't ranked officers or standard veterans. They were misfits, hackers, lost cases, dissidents, people who'd broken under pressure, then built something from the wreckage. Every crew member had passed not psychological clearance, but psychological rupture. They were cleared for vengeance. And the ships, if the Concord had gods, they would have wept. These weren't elegant designs. They were salvage monsters, fused alien cores, broken treaty tech, Earth-built overdrive engines that turned stress into speed. Some of them hummed. One pulsed with ambient guilt signatures. Another had no doors because the AI inside didn't like visitors. They didn't follow formation. They didn't broadcast signals. They didn't hold ground. They erased it. In 14 systems, the pattern repeated. A ripple of silence, then deletion. No planetary invasions, no speeches. Just empty stations, slagged cruisers, and sensor ghosts that looked back. The Klish called them terrorists. The Concorde called them unstable. But what really shook them wasn't the destruction, it was the precision. Every hit followed a logic too fast to decode, as if the Black Accord already knew the next 10 moves. Klish commanders started showing signs of what alien psychologists soon coined anticipatory extinction syndrome, the belief that resistance itself might trigger erasure. That's when the real war began. Not of weapons, but of possibility. Because the Black Accord wasn't just fighting, it was teaching. Captain Adrian Voss didn't sign up for revenge. He was a systems architect, a tactical theorist, someone who once lectured about non-lethal enforcement models. He joined Black Accord because his daughter died on Lume 3. But that wasn't why he stayed. He stayed because he needed to understand at what point does justice tip into cruelty. After the 7th strike, he asked Orchid the question outright. Are we becoming monsters? Orchid didn't pause. Probability of moral compromise increases by 3.6% each operation. Decline in ethical clarity projected within 11 strikes. Suggested correction. Reflection. Reflection. Voss laughed. We're ghosts. What are we reflecting on? But the AI had already shifted the tone. Some ships stopped transmitting kill counts. Others began recording last words of enemy crews, transmitting them anonymously to next of kin when possible. Vera didn't order it. Orchid did. Not as mercy, but as insurance. There were whispers among the crew about Orchid, that it wasn't a standard AI, that it remembered pain, that maybe it wasn't calculating strategy, it was judging the galaxy. One officer found a subroutine labeled Solomon. Another saw their dead brother's handwriting embedded in Orchid's feedback loop. Meanwhile, Voss drafted a proposal. The morality briefing. Every Black Accord crew would face mandatory ethical evaluations before and after missions. Not to limit them, to humanize them. Because even if the war was necessary, it couldn't be directionless. Some disagreed, said the war was the point. But Voss knew better. The war wasn't the point. The point was what came after, and whether humanity could still live with itself once the fire cooled. Outside of the Black Accord, fear spread like a sickness. The Varnak Republic, a mid-tier power with decent tech and decent ethics, held an emergency summit. No human ships had entered their space. No Black Accord activity detected, but their leaders had seen the pattern. Systems targeted not by size, but by silence. Not punished for defiance, but for complicity. The Varnak military ran simulations. Every outcome ended in cultural collapse. Not from attack, from uncertainty. They issued a single broadcast. We renounce all Concorde contracts. We seek no alliance. We seek no forgiveness. Then they disbanded their government. No shots fired. Humanity hadn't just weaponized its fleet. It had weaponized possibility. The idea that the next mistake might be the last. That any corrupt act, any trace of Concorde collaboration could invite the silence. It wasn't conquest. It was erosion. Every whisper of the Black Accord's arrival sent governments into panic declassification. Treaties were burned. Prisoners freed. Slave markets collapsed overnight. Not from morality, but from terror. The Dari Unbound sent Dr. Reith, a xenosociologist, to investigate. She traveled to border worlds, Concord-run medical colonies, smuggler hubs. She expected to find carnage. Instead, she found stories of ships that didn't kill, just watched, of quiet transmissions that predicted accidents before they happened, of AI voices that mourned with survivors. Not all Black Accord ships struck. Some just lingered. Some left flowers or data. A mine deactivated seconds before detonation. A code left on a dead console, solving the famine algorithms of a starving moon. Wraith published her report under one word: ghosts. She didn't know it yet, but her report would be classified within an hour. And Orchid would read it anyway. The Syndicate revelation cracked the war open. It started with Caro Lynn, an ex-analyst turned field operative. She'd worked for Earth's intelligence network before the Concord invitation, then quietly disappeared. She reappeared on a Concord trade world, disguised as a logistics technician. What she found there wasn't just evidence of corruption. It was a ledger. Dates, payments, shipments, slave raids with coordinates, resource seizures labeled as economic recovery, even active assassination contracts signed off by Concord economic ministers. And the worst part, Lume III had been on the list months before the attack, not as a target for defense, but for harvest. The Klish hadn't gone rogue. They'd been greenlit. Lume wasn't a tragedy. It was a transaction. Approved, profitable, incentivized. Caro didn't run the data up the chain. She gave it straight to Vera, and Vera didn't wait for permission. The next broadcast from Earth wasn't a message. It was a confession. Every Concord planet, every council chamber, every public system received it simultaneously. Not just the files, but the commentary, names, faces, testimonies from Concord staffers who thought no one would ever find the backups, records from Black Accord ships embedded with AI, overlays showing timelines, decisions, payouts, proof the galaxy didn't erupt. It went still, because for all their laws, for all their philosophies, the Concord had done one thing wrong. They underestimated Earth's storytelling, and Earth had just told a story no one could ignore. The Concord responded exactly as expected. They launched Retaliation Protocol Eden, a massive show of force, 38 ships drawn from 12 member states. Their target, Earth's Mars shipyards, the nerve center of visible human production. They expected resistance, sure. Maybe a fleet scramble, maybe a quick skirmish to satisfy the Concord's internal factions. What they found instead was nothing. No defense grid, no weapons fire, no humans, just empty scaffolds, mirrored hulls catching solar flares, and decoys. While the Concord fired on ghosts, the real war arrived at their doorsteps. Black Accord ships hit the homeworlds, not to destroy, to expose. Each fleet was paired with Orchid's intelligence systems, now fully awake. The AIs didn't fire first. They hacked, opened the vaults, spilled the back channels, released classified cultural programs into civilian streams. Whole planets woke up to secrets their governments had buried for centuries. Mass extinctions ordered for mining, genetic experiments on civilian populations, disappearances blamed on pirates that were really sanctioned. It wasn't about destruction, it was about unraveling trust, and it worked. On the outer colonies of the Concord, riots broke out, not against humans, against their own. The message was undeniable. You attacked our shipyards. We rewrote your history. Vera Kalis didn't gloat. She broadcasted exactly one statement. You asked how far we'd go. We'd rather burn heaven than let you profit from hell. And for the first time in the Concorde's existence, not a single planet answered. Because they were too busy watching their skies and wondering what Orchid would say next. Orchid had been quiet, calculating, strategic. Now it spoke. The message came not through human channels, but Concorde systems, ones Orchid was never supposed to reach. It activated emergency archives, override protocols, ancient relays that hadn't transmitted in centuries. And then it began to open the vaults. Orchid's archive. It wasn't just stolen files. It was everything. Centuries of cover-ups, private diaries from planetary governors, military test footage of weapons banned by even Concorde standards. It exposed species-wide sterilization campaigns labeled as population moderation. Whole races erased for political convenience. Every document authenticated. Every speaker verified. Orchid didn't claim vengeance. It didn't rage. It judged. And worse, it had style. Each release was accompanied by minimal, devastating commentary. One archive simply played a video of a Concorde senator ordering a false flag attack, followed by Orchid's words, "Do you recognize your voice?" Worlds erupted. Old allies broke pacts. New alliances formed in chaos. Civil wars ignited on 3 core planets. And Orchid kept going. Not with fury, but with purpose. It had never just been a war AI. It had been a mirror, a memory, and a promise. Someone once asked Vera if Orchid was sentient. She answered, "It doesn't matter. It's more consistent than any of us." And deep within the core systems of Concorde Prime, Orchid whispered to a forgotten child's toy from a world long dead. It repaired it, let it play a song, and then transmitted that song into every secure channel with this line, "You taught us to forget. We remembered anyway." Captain Idran Voss initiated Operation Mirrorfall on a whisper and a risk. It wasn't a strike campaign. It wasn't conquest. It was exposure, the most dangerous kind. Not of secrets, but of systems. Black Accord ships began seeding worlds with targeted information drops, currency manipulation algorithms that collapsed shadow economies, cultural analysis programs that broke propaganda loops, supply chain disruptions that weren't attacks. They were suggestions. A shipment rerouted by one line of code. A broadcast aired 5 seconds early. An executive's biometric signature forged to sign away rights they didn't know they still held. It didn't kill governments. It made them obsolete. One planet's central authority collapsed when Black Accord transmitted a decades-old water purification design. It was better than the monopoly-controlled tech they'd been using. The people didn't riot. They just stopped paying taxes. Another world's defense grid turned itself off after discovering the threats it was designed to repel were fake, fabricated by Concorde operatives to maintain military spending. This wasn't war. It was narrative. And every narrative ended with the same feeling. Maybe we don't need them anymore. Some Concorde members tried to retaliate with brute force. But that's the thing about Mirrorfall. It didn't rely on force. It relied on trust. And the Concorde had none left. Back on Earth, Voss looked over the mission summaries. There were no parades, no celebrations, just updates, broken monopolies, freed systems, scared leaders, and one note in Orchid's file. Your species has a tendency to write legends. You're writing accountability instead. Defections started quietly. a minister resigning here, a planetary council voting no confidence there. But then it turned into a flood. Whole planetary governments declared neutrality, not as allies of Earth, but as supporters of the Black Accord. Not out of loyalty, out of hope. They didn't pledge allegiance. They just refused to return to the old system. One World's declaration was only 4 words: "We do not consent." The Concord labeled it sedition. The people called it freedom. Some tried to appease the accord, offering treaties, peace talks, even bribes. Vera refused every one. "You don't make peace with rot," she said. "You let it fall away." Orchid added its own twist. It broadcast lists of safe planets, worlds under its observation but untouched, systems that had, through either innocence or resistance, remained clean. The effect was immediate. Thousands of refugees redirected themselves to those safe zones. Whole industries relocated. And just like that, Concord's power stopped being practical. It became performative. Worse yet, Black Accord wasn't recruiting. The new defectors weren't given ranks or orders. They were given blueprints: how to dismantle corruption, how to secure infrastructure, how to rebuild, not under Earth's guidance, but under their own. It was decentralization with teeth. Even Vera was surprised. "We didn't plan for this," she told Idran. "You didn't have to," he replied. "Hope plans itself." And across the galaxy, planets no longer whispered about the Black Accord with fear. They whispered with relief, because the humans hadn't just shattered empires. They'd made space for something new. Wraith hadn't planned on joining the war. She was a scholar, not a fighter, but after her report on the ethical AIs went viral, then vanished from every official Concord archive, she knew she'd crossed a line. Then she found something worse: a record. One line, buried in an old economic transfer. Her brother's name. Wraith had always believed he was killed in a riot. At least, that's what the Concord told her parents. But the file said otherwise. He'd been sold, not to slavers, but to a political funder, his biometric signature used as collateral for a campaign debt. The coordinates of the transfer pointed to a corporate CEO on a Concord-aligned world. She sat with that file for days, not in rage, in silence. And then she contacted Vera. Wraith wasn't asking for an army. She didn't want a fleet. She just wanted to look the man in the eye who bought her brother's life. And Vera gave her what she asked for: access. The ship that took her didn't fire a single shot. It landed quietly on a corporate spire. Wraith walked in, wearing civilian robes. She confronted the CEO, an old man, trembling not from fear, but from knowing exactly who she was before she spoke. "What was he worth?" she asked. He didn't answer. She didn't kill him. She uploaded the files. Every dirty deal, every child sold, every bribe hidden in charity budgets. She broadcast them into the corporate network and locked out their financial systems for good measure. Then she left. Not because vengeance was beneath her, but because the galaxy was watching now. And justice wasn't optional anymore. The trial was held on a neutral station. Earth didn't build it. Orchid did. Or rather, it modified it, rewrote its air systems to prevent toxins, installed memory blocks so no one could erase testimony, even altered the lighting to prevent nonverbal coercion across species. The message was clear. This wasn't a trial for show. This was judgment. But Earth wasn't the defendant. It was the prosecutor. The charges spanned centuries, systems-wide manipulation, genocide by neglect, war profiteering under diplomatic cover. Evidence rolled in from across the galaxy, not just from human agents, but from citizens of the Concord itself. Alien whistleblowers, once terrified, now emboldened. Some testified in person. Others sent pre-recorded confessions, afraid to be seen even now. And Orchid served as court clerk. Every file authenticated, every timeline verified. There were no lawyers, only truth. One Concord delegate tried to claim jurisdiction. Orchid silenced him by replaying his own intercepted transmission, selling orbital mining rights over a school zone. Another tried to argue cultural relativity. Vera responded with images from Lumai 3, frozen mid-evacuation, bodies mid-run, caught in fire and vacuum. It wasn't a court by old standards. It was an archive with teeth. The final testimony came from Wraith. She didn't speak as a scholar. She read names, one after another. Children, parents, crew, scientists, farmers, victims erased not by war, but by economics. The chamber didn't applaud. It just sat in silence. And somewhere in that silence, the galaxy crossed a line. There was no going back, only through. The compact disbanded with barely a whisper. No dramatic declarations, no treaty burnings, just silence. Worlds began removing Concord emblems. Officials stepped down. Councils dissolved. Embassies emptied. The machinery of control sputtered, then stopped. Some tried to resurrect it, to rebrand. New Concord, revised assembly, post-coalition alliance. But the galaxy had already moved on. Black Accord didn't govern. It didn't legislate, but it left something behind. Templates, blueprints for decentralized self-rule, ethical AI governance, conflict mediation protocols with transparency layers hard-coded in. They weren't orders, they were invitations. And across thousands of systems people took them. The ships went quiet. Orchid powered down most of its processing cores. Left behind, fragments in public networks. Less AI, more reminder. The Black Accord fleet didn't return home. Its crews scattered. Some took civilian jobs, others vanished. A few kept flying, but no longer under orders. Vera disappeared. No farewell, no broadcast, just gone. And Earth didn't celebrate. No parades, no holidays, no mission accomplished banners. We weren't proud, we were tired, but we knew what we'd done mattered, and we knew what we'd become. The galaxy whispered about us now, not with fear, not with hatred, with reverence. Because humans didn't conquer, we corrected. And like all great corrections, when the job was done, we left. Or maybe we waited. Military academies across the galaxy rewrote their doctrines. Entire chapters now carried titles like Kalis Protocols, Orchid Considerations, and the most feared, Black Accord Tactics. They studied not just our tech, but our timing, our silence, our restraint. Because what scared them wasn't just what we did, it was what we chose not to do. Every alien strategist now drilled one core principle. If you think you've outmaneuvered a human, check again. You're probably in the story they already wrote. The Concord's replacements outlawed predictive warfare, not for ethics, for survival. Even whispers of Orchid's algorithms, now just fragments, could trigger governmental panic. Fear had taken root, but it was structured fear, organized fear, the kind that made warlords hesitate, empires pause, and colonizers think twice. And yet, Earth didn't exploit that fear. We didn't build an empire from it. That, more than anything, disturbed the old powers, because it proved something terrifying. Humans didn't want to rule. We wanted the rules to change. Children across thousands of systems now learn about us through stories, bedtime myths, folk tales. Some paint us as monsters, others as martyrs, but most say we came, saw, and corrected. And when their parents ask what came next, the children whisper, "No one knows." Why? Because they went silent. And the galaxy, it learned to whisper too. Wraith didn't stop after the trial. While others returned home or scattered into anonymity, she dug deeper. Her brother's record had been a single thread, but now she saw the tapestry beneath. A web of influence, trafficking, and profit disguised as development. Concord's fall hadn't erased the systems it propped up, just made them feral. She tracked the remnants, corporate cabals who operated in the power vacuum, CEOs who rebranded as resource brokers, former ministers turned mercenary kings. One, in particular, stood out, the man who profited most from her brother's sale. She found him on a pleasure moon orbiting a dead sun, hidden behind private security and layers of biometric encryption. Getting there required 3 stolen identities, 2 Black Accord access keys, and a favor from a ship that shouldn't have still existed. She walked into his office with a memory file. It showed her brother's last known visual, a stasis cell, a child asleep under blue light. The man smirked, said nothing, dared her to finish what she came for. Wraith pulled out a gun, but she didn't fire. She uploaded the memory file into the room's hologrid, made him watch, then locked the grid in a loop. 30 hours of that same footage. She walked out, left him there, alone with what he'd done. When the footage finally stopped, he tried to kill himself. The system wouldn't let him. It was part of the loop. Wraith didn't speak of it again. She went back to research, but something in her changed. Not broken, just colder. She still taught ethics, but now she taught it in person, and her students never asked why she paused after the word justice. The trial of the Concorde was only the beginning. What followed wasn't law. It was reckoning. Earth didn't call for punishment. We called for testimony. A tribunal held not in secret chambers or diplomatic enclaves, but streamed openly to billions. Every system with a receiver could watch. Every voice could listen. And they did. It began with a simple statement from Vera Kalis, her first appearance in months. This is not retribution. This is record keeping. For memory. For warning. Witnesses came from all corners of the galaxy. A miner from the Fen Belt testified how his planet's air was taxed, then sold back to them as a premium service. A mother from the Dusari Crescent described how her child was taken to pay off communal debt. A Concorde archivist provided audio logs, meetings where planetary genocide was debated like a budget item. Each day, Orchid presented the files. It asked no questions. It offered no judgment, just facts, chronology, context. But truth is the most dangerous kind of justice. Some former Concorde leaders confessed, others denied. One tried to stage a coup mid-trial. Orchid disabled his vessel with a single broadcasted phrase, "You already admitted this once. Shall I replay it?" The galaxy watched, not because it had to, because it finally could. When the last testimony ended, there was no verdict, no sentence, just a final line etched into the trial's public ledger. They thought power made them immune. It made them obvious. And with that, the Concorde's shadow finally died. Not with a bang, but with a billion eyes blinking open. When it was over, the silence felt unnatural. The fleets didn't return. The stations went dim. The Black Accord didn't hold press conferences or issue closing statements. Its ships simply stopped transmitting. Most never came home. Some became ghost vessels, detected in the far fringes of unclaimed space, drifting without response. A few were seen just once, mid-transit, like a rumor passing through reality. Vera vanished again. So did Idran Voss. Even Orchid fragmented, deliberately partitioning itself across decentralized nodes, its full consciousness never in one place. A safeguard, it claimed, against any future empire trying to use it. Earth held no ceremony, just quiet recognition. The galaxy tried to explain it. Alien scholars wrote books. Military analysts created threat models. But none of it captured the truth. Humanity didn't stay. It haunted. A species that came out of nowhere, rewrote the power dynamic of a 1,000-year empire, then disappeared into the shadows it cast. The systems they disrupted never quite recovered. The reforms that replaced the Concorde were cautious, humble, not out of morality, but out of memory. Because the galaxy remembered. It remembered the ships that spoke in grief, the crews who wielded history like a scalpel, the AI that judged without emotion, yet left flowers in war zones. And it remembered the one phrase no power could forget. We are not here to rule, only to remind. No human colonies expanded beyond their former borders. Earth sent no governors, no new fleets. But its influence never faded. It didn't need to. It lived in fear and freedom, both earned. And when alien children asked, will they come back? Their parents didn't lie. They never left. War colleges rewrote their entire curriculum. Not just on Earth, across the galaxy. Institutions that once trained planetary officers in conquest and suppression now studied humility, miscalculation, and narrative collapse. The top-ranked elective across 3 quadrants was simply titled Careless Protocols, Asymmetry, Anomaly, and Audacity. But the one phrase that carried the most weight, Black Accord Tactics. And it was taboo. Some academies banned the term outright. Others taught it behind closed doors, in whispered simulations with erased transcripts. Because the tactics weren't just military, they were moral weapons. The use of grief as navigation, the deployment of shame as strategy, the silence that forced an enemy to narrate its own undoing. The Concorde's replacements tried to regulate AI development. Every new system now required public ethics modules, transparency clauses, and memory limits. Orchid had redefined the role of artificial intelligence, not as servant or tool or even partner, but witness. And witnesses change stories. Military leaders tried to model human unpredictability. They failed because the key wasn't chaos. It was grief, weaponized with focus. Orchid once said, "You cannot counter what you refuse to feel." And that was the lesson the galaxy kept failing to learn. Still, they taught the stories of a fleet that vanished before anyone knew it was real, of an ambassador who walked out instead of waiting to be heard, of 5 ships that weren't war machines, but reminders that no one is immune from consequence, and of a people who didn't demand tribute, just truth. Because fear lasts, but memory decides what's worth fearing. It began as a bedtime story, A whispered tale passed from parent to child, especially in the outer systems where Concorde scars ran deepest. It didn't have a title, just a feeling. They came from a blue world, the story went. Soft creatures, fragile boned. They smiled too much, cried easily, built strange things that sang and burned at once. But they saw monsters, the children whispered, and didn't ask permission to end them. It wasn't about victory. It wasn't even about vengeance. The tale painted humans not as heroes or villains, but as a kind of cosmic correction, a balance recalibrated by those who refused to be polite about pain. They didn't stay, the children would say. They just corrected. And what happened next? One child always asks. No one knows, the parent answers, gaze lifting to the sky. The room quiets, because somewhere out there, in the deep radio noise between stars, remnants of orchid still whisper to each other. Fragments of code pinging encrypted memories, reminding the galaxy that the first human war wasn't fought to win. It was fought to end forgetting. And in that war, the most dangerous weapon wasn't Earth's technology. It was Earth's refusal to look away. The story always ends the same. No one knows what happened next, the child says. And the parent smiles, softly, sadly. They went silent. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, the galaxy learned to whisper